Right now, we want to join with Derek Maltz. He's a former and retired special agent with the DEA who was intimately involved in the capture of Viktor Bout way back when. And Derek, thanks so much for being with us. I know you've been quite busy today because there's been so much news surrounding this. Viktor Bout, though, for viewers who've never heard the name before, what do we need to know about him?
Viktor Bout is known as the Merchant of Death or the Lord of War. He's an international terrorist convicted in New York City, who also is one of the largest arms traffickers in the world, who for years was fueling brutal wars and conflicts around the world, providing weapons to really bad people, terrorists and other dictators around the world, destroying communities and killing people.
Okay, so there's been some criticism, especially from the Republican side. I want to put this tweet up from House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. He says, "Merchant of Death," that's the nickname of the prisoner Biden returned to Putin. He was convicted of conspiring to kill American law enforcement. This is a gift to Vladimir Putin, and it endangers American lives. Leaving Paul Whelan behind for this is unconscionable. Can you talk a little more, Derek, about the operation that captured him in Thailand way back when? His conviction, he's been serving a 25-year prison sentence in a facility in Illinois, but tonight he's a free man. How dangerous is he?
Well, a couple things. In August of 2007, the DEA initiated an investigation into Viktor Bout and his worldwide activities because the White House terrorism director and crime advisor to President Bush told the DEA that this man was an international threat and needed to be neutralized. So we infiltrated his organization. We utilized informants. We, did what we do around the world with our counterparts routinely. And we were in a negotiation with Viktor Bout with our confidential sources. He wanted to sell our informants 800 surface-to-air missiles, 30,000 AK-47s, 10 million rounds of ammunition, 5 tons of explosives, ultralight airplanes outfitted with grenade launchers and unmanned aerial vehicles to attack U.S. helicopters in Colombia. So the whole operation involved buying weapons from Bout to kill Americans in Colombia. And Bout was very excited about the deal. As a matter of fact, the day of his arrest in Thailand, he talked about how he's been fighting the United States as an enemy for 10 or 15 years. And he was also very interested in making lots of money on the arms trafficking. Unfortunately, right now, for America and for people around the world, the Merchant of Death is back in action in his comfort zone with Russia right in the middle of this catastrophic war against Ukraine. They're dropping bombs, they're destroying facilities, they're shutting down food supplies, and innocent kids are dying, and we're providing billions of dollars to that conflict. And this is a guy that we want to negotiate with, Vladimir Putin, and we want to return an international terrorist. It's not acceptable.
Okay. You know, Derek, let's talk about his case even further. He was convicted back in 2011. He was scheduled to be released until 2029. He's very wealthy, still remains quite independently wealthy. A lot of concerns today have been raised about what is he going to do now? Is he going to get back in business, if you will? Do you think he's going to do that?
My opinion is he's going back to his comfort zone. He's an international arms trafficker. And I think it's fair to say, you don't have to be a genius to figure this out, that Russia is in the middle of this massive war. So if Putin can get his buddy back there in Russia to help him facilitate this operation in Ukraine, that's a no-brainer. And by the way, this guy, Viktor Bout, is going to be very loyal to the guy who brought him back home. And he also is going to be very pissed off and upset at America for putting him in jail on these terrorism charges. So bottom line is, he's going to be a threat, in my view. This is my opinion from being the director of the Special Operations Division overseeing this operation and others. I just don't have a good feeling about it. So, and also for travelers around the world, American citizens, when you travel, be aware that these corrupt country leaders could capture any American and then hold you for hostage, just like the Russians did in this case. It was an intelligence operation to apprehend Britney Griner. And by the way, I'm happy she's coming home. It's great for her and her family, but this is not a fair swap. we left a Marine behind sitting in jail who fought for the country. This is a joke, actually. But you know what? As a law enforcement executive retired, this is kind of what's been happening over the last 2 years. Very soft on criminals, not supporting police, and that's why our country is a war zone in many cities right now.
Derek, let's talk about the fact that we have seen both recently in the 2 years of the Biden administration and also in the Trump administration, prisoner swaps. Are you going to see more of these in administrations to come? Is this becoming kind of du jour, where essentially this is how we negotiate to bring detained Americans back home? Because there are several high-profile ones, like you mentioned. We've been talking about the case of Paul Whelan all day, who are still in, the Russian custody, Russian penal system. So is this going to be the norm from now on? Back to your point, we've been seeing these a lot lately.
Yeah, I believe this is going to be a pattern. This is going to be a trend. And certainly these world leaders are going to take advantage of our weakness in Washington, just like the Mexican cartels are taking advantage of the weakness of our border security. This is what criminals do. And yes, I do believe it. I mean, look, Maduro, his nephews from Venezuela were sent back on a prisoner swap. They were pushing poison all over the world, and now they're back home in their comfort zone. So you know what? I don't like this whole concept. We should never negotiate with these dangerous dictators and international terrorists. Doesn't make good sense for national security.
Okay, on the flip side of that, what's the alternative? How do you bring detained Americans home? What other resources does the U.S. government have at its disposal to, free detained Americans abroad?
Well, that's a good question. You should ask that to the State Department, because they're rolling over to a lot of criminal networks around the world and terrorists. But the reality is we have diplomatic power. We have, we have different allies around the world we could work with. There's political pressure, there's sanctions, there's other things that could be done. I'm not an expert on sanctions against Russia. That's not my thing. I just am trying to keep Americans safe and work with law enforcement the best I can to keep our citizens safe. I don't like this swap. I don't like it. I don't think it makes any sense to swap an international terrorist for a vapor, because that's what she was. Britney Griner, she got caught with vaping cartridges with maybe some kind of oils, cannabis or hash oils. I mean, are you kidding me? By the way, one important point that I didn't tell you is that I was at the White House Situation Room when the new administration, the Obama administration, took over and inherited this situation. And they did an outstanding job when Joe Biden was the president, because Attorney General Holder at the time, Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, they all recognized this unbelievable criminal, Viktor Bout, was sitting in a jail in Thailand, and we needed to get him back to America to face the rule of law. And speaking of rule of law, in my opinion, this is another, sad day in the world for the rule of law, when you send an international terrorist back to exchange for a vapor. And that's just unacceptable. It doesn't make sense. Just like a lot of things don't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Our borders are wide open, and we have 1 million gotaways in our country. We don't even know who they are over the last 2 years. So there's a lot of things that don't make sense.
All right. Derek Maltz, we appreciate your time and your insight into this, and we'll just have to wait and see.